Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another market recap, the first one of 2022, and it's going to be a pretty big episode. That's mainly in part due to the next update. The RuneScape economy is all over the place right now, with some items falling at an astronomical pace and others rising equally quickly. Things are constantly changing as the meta for next is developing. So I'm going to primarily be looking at that today, but we're also going to have a look at some of the new items, how their prices have developed over the first couple of days and where I think they might be going, and anything else related to the OSRS market over the last month or so. Thanks for watching as always, guys. If you do enjoy the episode, always appreciate a like on it. It really does make me happy. Helps with a ton with the videos too. Anyway, let's get started. Alright, so I thought we'd start with some of the most speculated on items for the next release. Stuff like the Armadillo Crossbow, the Spectral Spirit Shield, ranged offhand items, the Bow of Faerell, Bandos items, stuff like that. Things that players were heavily speculated on before the update. So what exactly happened to those items first? Well, let's start off with probably one of the biggest ones, the Armadillo Crossbow. Okay, so here we have the last week for the Armadillo Crossbow, and make a guess when Next came out. Yeah, I'll be right here. So after the next release, the Armadillo Crossbow plummeted from 72 mil all the way down to 37 mil, pretty much losing 50% of its value in a couple of hours. Now, very similar story for the Dragon Crossbow, going from around 2.5 mil down to 1 mil just in a few hours, again being sliced in half. Probably another one of the most heavily speculated items was the Spectral Spirit Shield. Interestingly, with the Spectral, for the first couple of hours, it actually spiked up to 180 mil before promptly plummeting by about half its value once again. Here we have the Elysian going from over 1.1 bill down to under 900 mil just in a day. You get the idea, but well, let's have a look at a couple others here. The Twisted Buckler. The Twisted Buckler went from 30 mil down to almost 10 mil, and now it's back up to 22 mil again. That's a very interesting price graph right there. That is the biggest sell-off I've seen ever, oh my god. Anyway, you get the idea. There's a bunch of other items here, but what exactly happened? Well, pretty soon after the next boss was released, players figured out that, well, the Twisted Bow is actually a very strong item there, at least in giant groups. Now, the big caveat here is right now Next is packed. Each world has dozens of people killing the boss, which means the meta for large groups is going to differ greatly from the meta for smaller groups. When you have 60 people killing Next, your defensive gear doesn't really matter that much. You're not really taking too much damage because there's so many people to tank it for you. So that means stuff like the Spectral, the Elysian, most of the offhands lose a ton of value in this setting. And so do crossbows, because if you don't really need the offhand, the crossbow isn't really that good. But it boiled down to the Twisted Bow being one of the most popular items so far. And that's why pretty much all of these items tanked so quickly. The Spectral is kind of interesting. Here's when the update came out, and it actually spiked up a huge amount immediately, and that was due to the virus mechanic. For about an hour or two, a lot of players assumed that the Spectral would be key and required to do the fight without losing a ton of supplies, but then other workarounds were discovered and the Spectral crashed like everything else. Now, what's really going to be interesting is over the coming weeks and months how the meta is going to shift. You can already see that for items like the Armadillo Crossbow, it's starting to rebound in price. It's going up right now. And I think that's already a reflection of Next's popularity waning. Not that the boss isn't profitable anymore, but as the worlds clear out a bit and smaller group sizes can form, other items are going to be more in demand. For example, the Elysian, jumping up 50 mil today, that's going to be a more prioritized item. The Spectral might be as well. The Twisted Buckler is still holding a lot of value, because once the group sizes shrink, defensive stats are going to be more important at Next. So that is why I personally think crossbows and defensive offhands and defensive gear might see a bit of a resurgence in the next couple of weeks, but who knows. Another interesting item here is we have Bandos items. Now these went up a ton thanks to the new Torva set. To create Torva, you need to dismantle Bandos pieces into Bandosian components. That said, pretty much any time an item sync like this is added, it's almost always heavily overvalued when the update comes out. And that's because I think a lot of players overlook one important point. That's that there's going to be way more Bandos chest plates in the game than Torva pieces, and the tacked on item sync is never going to be that impactful compared to what most people think it will be. So the Bandos chest plate fell from around 27 mil back down to 20 mil. Tassets fell from 27 mil back down to 20 mil as well. So Nex definitely tanked the price of a lot of items, but not everything. Now, Nex has also caused a few items to change more unexpectedly. Some items have actually been pushed upwards. One that was a bit surprising to me is the Armadillo helmet. Normally an item that doesn't really hold too much value. For example, if you look a year ago, it was worth like 3 or 4 mil. Not normally a very expensive item, but after the Nex release, this item has been popping off. It was already rising quite a bit leading up to January 5th, but after Nex, it doubled in value. This again just comes back to how prioritized DPS is right now in these big masses. I think once the masses die down, the Armadillo helmet will probably fall and tankier helmets may rise. Another really interesting one, Super Restores. Super Restores are insanely expensive right now, which I actually find kind of interesting. Yes, obviously Super Restores are very important at Nex, but the boss drops so many supply drops, they don't actually really need that many restores in brews, but either way, brews have gone up by about 6k each just in a few days, which is massive for an item like the Super Restore. Another big one are Dragon Bolts, and specifically Ruby Dragon Bolts. I was unfortunately one of the suckers who bought Ruby Dragon Bolts for like 8k each. Well, what are you gonna do? I just needed some. Either way though, Ruby Dragon Bolts and Dragon Bolts in general have gone up so much. Back in June, for example, they were 700 GP each, and now they are worth, at its peak, 10 times that amount, which is pretty insane. Now, another really unexpected price swing here is actually on Ancestral. A few days before the 5th, Ancestral was tanking, but as soon as the update came out, it spiked up by 30%. And that has to do with a very odd strategy that became popular on day 1, where to avoid the virus drain mechanic from Nex, you'd actually wear another Combat Triangles robe set so that you would have higher magic attack than ranged attack, and the virus would drain your magic level, which wouldn't be as big of an issue. So now I think it'd probably be a good time to have a look at the new items. Let's start off with the biggest one here, the Zerite Crossbow. This one is a bit surprising to me. I think a lot of people underestimated how popular the Zerite Crossbow would be. And you can really see that reflected in the price. Sure, to begin with, very expensive. That kind of just the case with any item. Fell very quickly to under 600 mil. From there, it's actually risen quite a bit, peaking at 1.1 bill just yesterday. And since then, it's fallen back down to around 900 mil, but still an incredibly expensive item. Now, the Zerite Crossbow is just a direct upgrade to the Armadillo, so it's always going to be the best crossbow in the game, but what exactly does that mean? Crossbows historically aren't used very much in endgame bossing, so why is the Zerite Crossbow still worth so much? Well, one main factor right now I think is Nex. It is incredibly good at Nex itself, which means as long as Nex is incredibly popular and good money, the Zerite Crossbow will probably still see a ton of use. Right now though, the question I have on my mind is there any other uses for it? Because if it's only ever really a self-contained use at Nex, then its price will be very dependent on the price of the other Nex items and just the general profitability of the boss. Okay, the other Zerite item we have here is the Zerite Vambraces. Once again, right after release, the items actually fell a lot. The Zerite Vambraces bottomed out at around 120 mil and now are worth about 200 mil. Now you'll see this trend actually across most of the new items. On day 1, the price of most of the items fell quite a lot, but actually rebounded leading into day 2. Now in the case of Torva, well, the price is now falling quite a bit. Here's the Torva plate down to 400 mil. The plate legs actually worth a bit more, are down to 450 mil, and the Torva full helm is down to around 250 mil. And finally here we have the Ancient God Sword, which is actually one of the rarest of the items, yet one of the cheapest, mainly because it is viewed as being quite a bit weaker. Now I think on day 1, there were a ton of players killing Nex, there were a lot of drops that were seen, and you could pretty much camp Nex indefinitely. You almost never had to go get kill count again, you never had to leave, you could just continuously kill the boss over and over and over again. In mass worlds, you could easily get up to 40 or 50 kills per hour. But on day 2, some more numbers came out on what the actual drop rates for the items might be. And it turns out that while the numerical drop rate isn't that rare. Right now, the rough estimate I believe is around 1 in 40 for an item, which is common compared to other bosses, but when you think of necks, and currently if there's 60 people in your world, all assumed to get a roughly equal chance of getting it, that means your individual chance of getting any drop is like 1 in 2400, which is actually very rare. So I think after that, all of the items jumped back up once the rarity of the items started to become a little more clear. And at this point, now we're just kind of waiting to see where the meta settles and how in demand these items are going to be. Very curious though to see what the price is going to look like over the next month or two. Next up here we have Blood Essence, which after the first hours were worth around 400k each and have now fallen to 180k, something like that. Makes sense because they're essentially just 1,000 blood runes, and blood runes now have plummeted quite a lot, currently valued at 280 each. And finally here we have the Nihil Shard, which is worth only around 10k each. Anyway, that is going to be it for my market analysis for next. As always, let me know your guys' opinion down below. I do read all the comments, so I will at least read your comment. Thanks for watching as always, and I will see you next time. Now, before I go here, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. Thank you so much to Cesarium OSRS, The Hybrid, Alejandra, Sejuani's Flail, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed at the Dragon tier. Thank you guys so much, really appreciate it. Also a giant thank you to Ryan Shady, Mexos, Base Titch, NDM001, and YoYoSub89 for all subscribing at the Runite tier. Really means a lot. As always, if you are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is a great way to support me directly. You will be immortalized in all of my future videos, get access to a custom role in my Discord server, and my video release schedule. Thanks again, guys, and I will see you next time.